Good morning.
Good morning.
I thought it would work again, but it didn't. And I wish more of God's people would understand why it didn't work. The first time I tried it, it worked all according to plan. God had built the beautiful garden and created people in God's image. And being the person or the being or the thing that I am, I decided that it was my duty to try to corrupt that. And I thought the best way to do it was to encourage the people to do the one thing that God had told them not to do. And I asked them to do it knowing that God creates in God's people a place in their heart that they desire to fill with God. And that these first people thought that to fill this God hole in their heart, they had to become like God. So I visited them and I talked with them and I offered the opportunity to become more godlike. And being who they are, they seized the opportunity. I mean, who wouldn't, right? To all of a sudden be presented as having no limitations, being all-powerful and almighty. I tempted them to commit idolatry, to act or to make them believe they could become the very thing that created them. And they took it. And their eyes were opened and they were further separated from the thing that they thought they were going to become. Now I was kind of surprised by God's actions, that God didn't smite them down, that God didn't destroy them. Instead, God gave them a second chance. And knowing that I had success this very first time, I thought I would have success every time I tried it. I mean, humans can be so very weak, can't they? Humans do the best that they can to achieve power, to achieve authority, to achieve fame, and they do so at the risk of hurting others. Humans can be a very self-centered group of people. And why not play on that weakness? Why not tempt them in this weakness, saying, forget about the commandments, to love God and to love one another. Obviously, you must be the most important. Look out for yourselves. Disregard everyone else. So I have some idea on why it didn't work later on. You see, I had heard this story and these tales about this man named Jesus. I had heard that he was born according to the prophecy, and that he had shown up and been baptized. And at his baptism, the voice of God had spoke, saying, "You are my beloved, with you who I am well pleased." And that the Spirit of God descended on him like a dove. And this is something I had never heard before. And I knew and I had heard that same Spirit of God had then asked him to go out into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, presumably to reflect on the gloriousness of being marked as a beloved child of God, presumably to reflect on what this calling meant for him and for the world. And I hear that his followers still enter into that time of 40 days and 40 nights every year. And I thought to myself, when will he be at his weakest? When can I tempt him to prove that God is not the God of all powerfulness, and God is not the God of almighty and all-knowing? How can I disprove God by getting God's Son to fall into temptation, to grab power for his own? So I thought about it strategically and decided to wait until he was at his most hungry. The end of that 40th day and 40th night. And I decided to show him and show up and offer him the one thing that he probably desired more than anything else. The desire to eat food. And I told him that food was all around him and that all he had to do was change the rocks that were surrounding him into bread so that he could eat. And he didn't fall for that trick. He said that man can't live by bread alone. Essentially saying there's something much more than this simple bread that I find my power in, that I find my identity in. So then I decided to tempt him by threatening his own safety. And I took him to the highest place around, the tip of the highest temple, and said, if you really are the Son of God, throw yourself off of this temple. You will be protected. You will challenge God in a way while you'll prove that you're more powerful than God. The prophecy says that you will be protected. You will be raised up on eagle's wings. And yet again, he didn't fall into this temptation. Again, he pointed to something bigger than he was. Something that informed his identity in a way that many other humans simply don't. So the third time's the charm, right? So I took him on the top of the highest mountain and said, this can all be yours. You can have unfathomable power. You can rule everything that you see. All you have to do is bow down and worship me and claim your identity in me. Claim your identity in your power. And yet again, he resisted that temptation and said, no, we are called to worship the Lord our God. I think it failed because, unlike most of you and me, I claim my identity in what I do and how I act and how much power I can get and how much I have and how respected I am and how people think of me. It's all about what I do. And I think the difference with this man named Jesus is that he rooted his identity in who he was, not what he could do. And who he was spoken to him at his baptism. You are my beloved. With you I am well pleased. I think the temptation to grab power for his own failed because Jesus recognized that his life, his mission, his ministry belong to his Father in heaven. And maybe, just maybe, if all Jesus' followers here and now understood their identity and their call to service to be the exact same thing, my work wouldn't be as easy as it